Good evening, and welcome back to Footnotes Folly. I am Professor Reginald St. John Pemberton, and tonight we leave the marble and the intrigue of Rome and cross the Rhine into the cold forests of the north. This is Tacitus's Germania, short, strange, brilliant little book written around the year 98, in which the greatest of Roman historians turns ethnographer and describes the barbarian peoples beyond the empire's frontier. We give it to you complete, in plain modern English, from Thomas Gordon's grand old public domain translation. The plain rendering and the asides are my own. This is part 1. We begin with the land itself, its rivers and its forests, and the Germans' own legends of their origin, then their arms and their gods, the divination they trust before battle, the assemblies where free men decide affairs with a clash of weapons, and the hard, frugal, fiercely independent life they lead. And do listen, for the sly thing Tacitus is really doing. Every virtue he praises in these barbarians is a quiet rebuke aimed at the soft and luxurious Rome of his own day. Let us begin.
All Germany is bounded in this way. It is separated from Gaul, from Rhoetia, and from Pannonia by the rivers Rhine and Danube. It is separated from Sarmatia and Dacia by fear on both sides, or else by high mountains. All the remaining parts are surrounded by the ocean, which forms vast bays and contains an enormous stretch of islands. We have only lately learned of certain nations and kingdoms there, revealed by war. The Rhine rises in the Rhôtian Alps from a summit that is entirely rocky and steep. After a slight bend toward the west, it is lost in the Northern Ocean. The Danube flows from the mountain Abnoba, a mountain very high but very easy to climb, and after passing through several nations, it empties by 6 channels into the Euxine Sea. Its 7th channel is swallowed up in the fens. I am inclined to believe that the Germans derive their origin from no other people, and that they are in no way mixed with different nations that came among them. In ancient times, people searching for new homes did not travel by land, but were carried by fleets, and ships from our part of the world rarely enter that vast ocean, so boundless, and I might say, so hostile and forbidding. Besides the dangers of a stormy, terrible, and unknown sea, who would leave Asia, or Africa, or Italy, to go to Germany, a land ugly and rough, under a harsh climate, gloomy to look at and hard to cultivate, unless it were his native country? In their old ballads, which among them are the only kind of records in history, they celebrate Tuisto, a god sprung from the earth, and Manus his son, as the fathers and founders of the nation. To Manus they assign 3 sons, from whose names 3 peoples are called: the Ingivons, who live nearest the ocean, the Hermanons, who live in the middle country, and all the rest, the Istavones. Some, taking support from the obscurity of antiquity, maintain that the god had more sons, and that from them came more names of peoples: the Marsians, Cambrians, Suevians, and Vandalians. They say these are the names that are truly genuine and original. As for the name Germany, they say it is a recent word, given only lately. Those who first crossed the Rhine and drove out the Gauls, and who are now called Tungrians, were then called Germans. In this way, little by little, the name of one tribe prevailed, not the name of the whole nation. So a name first caused by terror and conquest was afterward chosen by them as their common mark, and by adopting a newly invented name, they came to be universally called Germans. They have a tradition that Hercules also once came into their country, and they praise him above all other heroes in the songs they sing when they advance to battle. Among them there is also a kind of verse, by the reciting of which, called by them barding, they stir up courage. Indeed, through this chanting itself they try to foretell the outcome of the approaching fight. According to the different sound of the battle cry, they either rush on fiercely or draw back in fear. What they utter seems less like singing than like the voice and effort of bravery. They chiefly aim at a fierce and harsh tone, with a broken and uneven murmur. For this reason they put their shields to their mouths, so that the voice, by rebounding, may swell with greater fullness and force. There are also some who think that Ulysses, during his long and fabulous wanderings, was carried into this ocean and entered Germany, that a Sibergen was founded and named by him, a city that still stands and is inhabited on the bank of the Rhine, that in the same place an altar dedicated to Ulysses was once found, with the name of his father Laertes added to his own, and that on the borders of Germany and Rhoetia certain monuments and tombs inscribed with Greek characters still remain. These are traditions that I do not intend either to support with arguments of my own or to refute. Let everyone believe or deny them according to his own inclination. For my part, I agree with those who suppose that the people of Germany have never been mingled with other nations through intermarriage, but have remained a pure and independent people, resembling no one but themselves. For this reason, among such a great multitude of men, the same build and appearance is found in all of them: stern blue eyes, yellow hair, huge bodies, but strength only for the first attack. They are not equally able to endure pain and hard labor, and they cannot at all bear thirst and heat. They have been hardened by their climate and soil to endure hunger and cold. Their lands, though somewhat different in appearance from place to place, taken altogether consist of gloomy forests or foul marshes. Toward the borders of Gaul they are lower and wetter, toward Noricum and Pannonia they are more mountainous and windy. The soil is very fit for grain, but entirely unfriendly to fruit trees. It abounds in flocks and herds, but these are generally small in growth. Even their oxen lack the usual stateliness, as well as the natural ornaments and grandeur of the head. They take pleasure in the number of their herds. These are their only riches, and the riches they most desire. The gods have denied them silver and gold, whether in mercy or in anger I cannot tell. Yet I would not venture to assert that no vein of gold or silver is produced in Germany, for who has ever searched? It is certain that they do not care about using or possessing these metals. Among them, indeed, silver vessels may be seen, such as have been presented to their princes and ambassadors, but they are valued no more than vessels made of clay. The Germans next to our frontiers, however, value gold and silver for trade, and they are used to distinguishing and preferring certain of our coins. Those who live farther away are more primitive and simple in their dealings, and exchange one commodity for another. The money they like is the old and long, known kind, either indebted or stamped with a chariot and 2 horses. They seek silver more than gold, not from affection or preference, but because small pieces are more convenient for buying cheap and common things. They do not, in fact, have much iron, as can be seen from the kind of weapons they use. They seldom use swords with a larger sort of spear. Instead they carry javelins, which in their own language are called frams. These have short, narrow iron points, but they are so sharp and easy to handle that the same weapon can be used either at a distance or in close fighting, as the situation requires. Even the horsemen are satisfied with only a shield and a javelin. The foot soldiers also throw missiles. Each man carries several of them, and hurls them to a great distance, while naked or wearing only a light cloak. They make no display in their equipment, except that their shields are varied and decorated with striking colors. Very few have coats of mail, and hardly anyone is seen with a headpiece or helmet. Their horses are not remarkable either for beauty or for speed. Nor are they trained, as the Romans trained theirs, to wheel about and make sudden turns. They simply drive them straight forward in a line, or turn them completely around, keeping such close and even order that no one is left behind the rest. Anyone considering their whole manner of war can see that their main strength lies in their infantry. For this reason they fight with foot soldiers mixed among the cavalry, because the speed of these foot soldiers is well matched to the movements and attacks of the horsemen. The infantry are chosen from the strongest of the young men and placed in front of the army. The number sent is fixed, 100 from every village. At home they continue to be called by that very name, the 100 Band. Thus what began merely as a number afterwards becomes a title and a mark of honor. When they arrange their army, they divide the whole force into separate battalions, drawn up with a sharp front. To give ground in battle, so long as one returns again to the attack, is regarded by them as strategy rather than fear. Even when the result of the fighting is still uncertain, they carry away the bodies of their dead. The greatest disgrace that can befall a man is to have abandoned his shield. Anyone marked with such shame is not allowed to take part in their sacrifices or enter their assemblies. Many who escaped alive from battle have hanged themselves in order to end this dishonor. In choosing kings, they look to the splendor of birth, in choosing generals to bravery. The power of their kings is neither unlimited nor arbitrary. Their generals gain obedience less through formal authority than through personal example, by showing themselves energetic and brave, by distinguishing themselves through courage and skill, and by standing out above all others in admiration and command at the head of the army. No one except the priests is allowed to administer correction or impose chains or blows. When the priests do this, it is not considered a punishment, nor something ordered by the general, but a command coming directly from the deity whom they believe to be present with them in war. For this reason, when they go to battle, they carry with them certain images and figures taken from their sacred groves. The chief thing that stirs their courage is that their troops in pointed battalions are not formed at random, or by the accidental gathering of men, but by whole families and groups of kindred. In addition, those dearest to them by nature are placed close to the battlefield. From there they hear the mournful cries of their wives, and from there the cries of their small children. These are the witnesses whom each man most respects and fears. These give the praise that affects him most deeply. They bring their wounds and injuries to their mothers or their wives, and the mothers and wives are not shocked to count or even suck the bleeding wounds. They also bring food and encouragement to their husbands and sons while they are engaged in battle. History records that some armies, already giving way and ready to flee, have been restored by the women, through their relentless pleading and prayers. The women showed their breasts and reminded the men of the captivity that threatened them, and to the Germans this fate is far more dreadful when it falls on their women. For this reason, the loyalty of those communities that are required to provide noble maidens as hostages is bound more strongly than that of others. They even believe that women possess something divine and a spirit of prophecy. They do not refuse to consult them, nor do they disregard the answers they give. In the reign of the deified Vespasian, we saw Veleta long regarded and honored as a divinity by many nations. In earlier times they also worshipped Orinia and several others, not out of courtesy or flattery, and not as deities invented by themselves. Of all the gods, Mercury is the one they worship most. On certain fixed days, it is lawful for them to offer even human victims to him. They appease Hercules and Mars with animals normally permitted for sacrifice. Some of the Suevians also make offerings to Isis. I have found little explanation for the cause and origin of this foreign sacrifice, unless the shape of her image, formed like a galley, shows that the worship came from abroad. As for the rest, because of the grandeur and majesty of heavenly beings, They judge it wholly improper to confine the gods within walls or to represent them in any human likeness. They consecrate entire woods and groves, and they give the names of the gods to these secluded places. These are divinities whom they behold only through contemplation and inward reverence. They are more devoted to lots and auguries than any other nation. Their way of divining by lots is very simple. They cut a twig from a fruit-bearing tree and divide it into small pieces. They mark these pieces with different signs, then throw them at random and without order onto a white garment. Then the priest of the community, if the lots are being consulted for public matters, or the father of a family, if the matter is private, solemnly invokes the gods, lifts his eyes to heaven, and picks up each piece 3 times. After this he forms a judgment according to the marks already made. If the signs forbid the action, they are not consulted again about the same matter that day. Even when the signs are favorable, confirmation is still sought through auguries. Here too they practice the familiar method of foretelling events from the cries and flight of birds. But it is especially characteristic of this nation to seek divine warnings and omens from horses as well. These horses are maintained by the state in the same sacred woods and groves. They are all milk white and are never used for any earthly labor. When yoked to the holy chariot, they are accompanied by the priest and by the king, or by the chief of the community, who carefully observe the horse's actions and neighing. No form of augury is trusted more, not only by the common people, but also by the nobles and by the priests. The priests consider themselves ministers of the gods, and the horses privy to his will. They also have another kind of divination, used to learn the outcome of great and important wars. From the nation with which they are at war, they somehow obtain a captive, no matter by what means. They set him to fight against a man chosen from among themselves, each armed according to the custom of his own country. According as victory falls to one side or the other, they draw an omen for the whole war. The chiefs decide matters of lesser importance. Questions of greater consequence are considered by the whole nation, but in such a way that even the issues left to the people's will and decision are first examined and discussed by the chiefs. Unless some accident or emergency interrupts them, they meet on fixed days, either at the new moon or at the full moon, because they believe these times are the most fortunate for beginning any business. In reckoning time, they do not count days as we do, but nights. Their laws are framed in that style, and their assemblies are appointed in that style. Among them, night seems to lead and govern the day. One fault grows out of their very broad liberty. They do not all meet at once, like men under command and afraid to disobey. Often the second day, and often even the third, is lost because the members gather so slowly. They sit wherever they please, mixed together like a crowd, and all of them are armed. The priests order silence, and at that time the priests are given the power to enforce it. Then the king or chief is heard, and so are others, each according to his standing in age, noble birth, military reputation, or eloquence. Every speaker's influence comes more from his ability to persuade than from any power to command. If a proposal displeases them, they reject it with an indistinct murmur. If it pleases them, they brandish their javelins. The most honorable way for them to show agreement is to express their applause by the clash and sound of their weapons. In the assembly, it is permitted to bring accusations and to prosecute capital crimes. Punishments differ according to the nature of the offense. Traitors and deserters are hanged on trees. Cowards, the lazy, and unnatural prostitutes are smothered in mud and bogs under a heap of hurdles. This difference in executions has a purpose. When obvious wickedness is punished, it should also be displayed to public sight, but effeminacy and pollution must be buried and hidden. For lighter offenses, too, the penalty is measured by the fault. When convicted, offenders are ordered to pay a set number of horses or cattle. Part of this fine goes to the king or to the community, and part to the person whose wrong has been avenged or to his nearest kin. In the same assemblies, they also choose their chiefs or rulers, the men who administer justice in their villages and boroughs. To each of these rulers, 100 persons chosen from among the people are assigned to accompany and assist him, men who support him both with their authority and with their advice. They conduct no business, public or private, unless they are armed. But their custom does not allow any man to bear arms until the community has declared that he is fit to use them. Once that testimony has been given, one of the rulers, or the young man's father, or some kinsman honors him in the middle of the assembly with a shield and javelin. This is their manly robe. This is the first degree of honor granted to their youth. Before this, they seem to belong only to a private family. From then on, they belong to the commonweal. The princely rank is granted even to very young men when their bloodline is especially noble, or when their fathers have performed great and distinguished services for the state. Around the others, who are stronger and have long since been tested, followers crowd eagerly, and it is no disgrace to be seen among such attendants. Among the followers themselves there are higher and lower ranks, exactly as the man they follow thinks proper. There is intense rivalry among the followers, each striving to stand first in favor with his prince. There is also intense rivalry among the princes, each trying to surpass the others in the number and courage of his followers. This is their chief dignity and their main strength, to be constantly surrounded by a large band of chosen young men, who are an ornament and a glory in peace, and a guard in defense and war. A prince wins great fame and a great name not only among his own people, but even among neighboring communities, when he exceeds others in the number and spirit of his followers. Such men are courted by embassies, honored with gifts, and often by the terror of their reputation alone, they scatter wars before they begin. On the day of battle, it is disgraceful for the prince to be outdone in acts of bravery, and disgraceful for his followers not to equal the bravery of the prince. But to come back alive from a battle in which their prince has been killed is lifelong infamy, and a stain that can never be removed. To protect their prince, defend him, and credit all their own brave deeds to his glory is the whole substance and the most sacred part of their oath. The princes fight for victory, the followers fight for the prince. Many young nobles, when their own community grows weak through long peace and inactivity, go impatiently to other states that are then at war. This is because these people cannot endure rest, because dangerous enterprises bring them fame more quickly, and because they cannot support their great train of retainers except by violence and war. From the generosity of their prince, these followers expect and receive their war horse and their victorious javelins stained with the blood of their enemies. Instead of pay, they are supplied with a daily table and meals, roughly prepared but very plentiful. The means for maintaining this generosity and open-handedness come from continual wars and plunder. You could not as easily persuade them to cultivate the ground, or to wait for the seasons to return and the years produced to appear, as you could persuade them to provoke an enemy and risk wounds and death. They consider it dull and spiritless to gain by sweat what they can win by blood. When they have any break from war, they do not spend much time hunting. They spend much more of their time in idleness, given over to sleep and feasting. All the bravest and most warlike men do nothing at all. They leave the whole care of the house, the lands, and the possessions to their wives, to the old men, and to the weakest members of the household. They themselves lounge about. Such is the astonishing contradiction in their nature. In the same men, there is so much love of laziness and so much hatred of peaceful rest. Their communities are accustomed, voluntarily and man by man, to present their princes with a certain number of animals or a certain portion of grain. This contribution is regarded as a mark of reverence and honor, but it also helps supply their needs. They are especially pleased by gifts that come from bordering countries, sent not only by private individuals, but in the name of the state: fine horses, splendid armor, rich harness, and collars of silver and gold. Now they have also learned from our teaching to accept money. It is well known that the different peoples of Germany do not live together in cities. They do not even allow their houses to stand close against one another. Each household lives separately, choosing a place because a spring, a field, or a wood has attracted them to settle there. Their villages are laid out with houses facing one another in rows, but not in the Roman fashion, where buildings are joined side by side. Every man leaves open ground all around his own house, either as protection against accidents by fire or because they do not know how to build otherwise. They do not use mortar or tiles. In all their buildings they use rough, unshaped materials, without beauty or finished design. Some parts they coat with a kind of earth so clean and bright that it looks like painted color. They also dig deep caves in the ground and heap large piles of dung over them. Into these places they withdraw for shelter during winter, and there they store their grain, for such enclosed spaces soften the force of the severe and excessive cold. Besides this, when an enemy invades, he can only ravage the open country. He either does not know about these hidden underground retreats, or he must let them escape him because he is uncertain where to find them. For clothing they all wear a cloak fastened with a clasp, or if they lack one, with a thorn. Where the cloak does not cover them, they are naked, and they spend whole days lying before the fire. The richest among them are distinguished by a tunic, not broad and flowing like those worn by Sarmatians and Parthians, but fitted closely around the body and showing the shape of every limb. They also wear the skins of wild beasts. Those who live near the Rhine use this clothing plainly and without special care, but those farther inland are more particular about it, since they have no clothing brought in by trade. They select certain wild animals, strip off their hides, and decorate them with many spots, adding also the skins of creatures from the sea, such as are produced in the distant ocean and in seas unknown. The clothing of the women is not different from that of the men, except that the women are more neatly dressed in linen embroidered with purple. They wear no sleeves, so their whole arms are bare, and the upper part of the breast is also exposed. Yet the laws of marriage are strictly observed there, and in all their customs nothing deserves more praise than this. They are almost the only barbarians who are content with one wife, except for a very few among them, men of rank who take several wives not out of lust or indulgence, but because many families seek alliance with the splendor of their name. The wife brings no dowry to the husband. Instead, the husband brings one to the wife. Parents and relatives are present and approve the gifts. These are not gifts suited to feminine luxury or refinement, nor things meant to adorn a newly married woman, but oxen, a bridled horse, a shield, a javelin, and a sword. By these gifts she is married. She in turn brings some arms to her husband. They regard this as the strongest bond, the sacred rites, and the gods of marriage. So that the woman may not think herself free from concerns of courage and fighting, or exempt from the chances of war, the first ceremonies of her marriage warn her that she comes to her husband as a partner in his dangers and labors. She is to suffer with him equally and to venture with him equally, both in peace and in war. This is clearly shown by the oxen joined under the same yoke, by the horse already equipped, and by the gift of arms. In this way she must be prepared to live, and in this way to die. The arms she receives then must be kept unviolated and handed back to her sons, as gifts worthy of them, which their wives may receive again and pass on in turn to her grandchildren. They therefore live in a well-protected state of chastity. They are not corrupted by seductive spectacles and public entertainments, nor stirred by the temptations of feasting. Men and women alike are ignorant of learning and of secret exchanges by letters. Among so large a people, adultery is extremely rare. When it occurs, it is punished at once, and the punishment is left to the husband. After cutting off the woman's hair, he drives her naked from his house in the presence of her relatives and beats her through the whole village. No pardon is ever granted to a woman who has prostituted herself. However beautiful she may be, however young, however wealthy, she can never find another husband. In truth, no one there turns vice into amusement, and corrupting others or yielding to corruption is not called the fashion of the age. Still better are those communities in which only virgins marry, and where every hope and desire of a woman is fixed once for all upon a single marriage. As they have only one body and one life, so they take only one husband, so that beyond him they may have no thought and no further wishes, and may love him not merely as a husband but as marriage itself. To limit childbirth and the increase of children is considered a hateful crime, as is killing newborn infants. Among them, good customs have more power than good laws have among other peoples. In all their houses, the children are raised naked and dirty, and so they grow into those limbs and that bulk which we behold with wonder. They are all nourished by their own mother's milk, and are never handed over to maidservants or nurses. You cannot distinguish the master from the slave by any greater softness in upbringing. They live among the same cattle without separation, and lie on the same ground without distinction, until at the proper age the freeborn are separated from the rest, and their bravery brings them notice. Young men come slowly and late to the use of women, and so they preserve the strength of youth for a long time. Nor are the young women hurried into marriage. Both sexes must have the same vigorous youth and similar stature, and they marry when they are equal and strong in body. In this way, the robustness of the parents is inherited by the children. Children are valued by their mother's brother as much as by their father. Some regard this blood tie as the most sacred and binding of all, and when hostages are received, such pledges are especially considered and demanded, because they possess both the deepest affections and the widest influence within the family. Yet every man's own children are his heirs and successors. They make no wills. If there are no children, the nearest kin inherit, first his own brothers, then his father's brothers or his mother's brothers. The more an old man is surrounded by descendants, relatives, and connections by marriage, the more favor and reverence he receives. No advantage or honor comes from being childless. You must take on all the quarrels of your household, whether they come from your father or from your relatives, just as you must take on all their friendships. Yet these feuds are not impossible to settle, nor do they last forever. Even for so grave a crime as killing a man, compensation is made by paying a fixed number of sheep and cattle, and by that payment the whole family is satisfied and reconciled. This habit is healthy for the community, because among a free people private hatreds and factions are always more threatening and dangerous. In social feasts and acts of hospitality, no nation on earth has ever been more generous or more open-handed. To refuse any person admission under your roof is considered wicked and inhuman. Everyone receives every arrival and entertains him with as large a meal as his means can provide. When the host's entire supply has been used up, the man who has shown such hospitality guides and accompanies his guest to another place where hospitality can be found. Together they go to the next house, although neither has been invited. The lack of an invitation makes no difference. They are received there with the same frankness and kindness. In applying the rules and benefits of hospitality, no distinction is made between a stranger and a familiar acquaintance. When you leave, if you ask for anything, it is customary to grant it, and they ask from you with the same ease. They take pleasure in gifts, but neither claim credit for what they give nor admit any obligation for what they receive. Their way of entertaining guests is familiar and kind. As soon as they rise from sleep, which they usually prolong until late in the day, they bathe, most often in warm water, as is natural in a country where winter is very long and harsh. After bathing they sit down to eat, each man by himself, on his own seat and at his own separate table. They then go about their business, always armed, and they just as often go armed to a banquet. To keep drinking day and night without stopping brings no reproach on anyone. Because they are drunk, quarrels are frequent, as is usual among men overcome by liquor, and these quarrels rarely end in angry words alone, but most often in wounds and bloodshed. These feasts they also commonly discuss how to reconcile enemies, how to form marriages and alliances, how to choose princes, and finally how to decide on peace and war. They believe that at no other time is the mind more open to simple and honest thoughts, or more stirred by great and daring ones. This people is by nature neither subtle nor political, and the freedom of the place and occasion makes them still more ready to reveal the most hidden movements and purposes of their hearts. So, after the minds of all have once been opened and declared, their various opinions are reviewed and examined again on the following day. In this way both moments are properly used. They deliberate when they do not know how to hide their thoughts, they decide when they cannot be deceived by them. For drink they make a liquid from barley or other grain, and ferment it so that it resembles wine. Those who live on the bank of the Rhine also trade in wine. Their food is very plain: wild fruit, fresh game, or curdled milk. They satisfy hunger without ceremony, without elaborate preparation, and without delicate dishes. In quenching thirst, they do not show the same moderation. If you only indulge their excess in drinking and supply them with as much as they desire, it will be no less easy to conquer them by their vices than by arms. They have only one kind of public entertainment, and the same display is shown at all their gatherings. Young men, who make this their sport, throw themselves naked into a dance among sharp swords and the deadly points of javelins. Practice gives them skill, and skill gives them grace, yet they gain no profit or pay from it. This bold and playful danger has its reward only in pleasing the spectators. What is remarkable is that gambling with dice is one of their most serious occupations. Even when sober they gamble, and they risk winning or losing so desperately that, after all their property has been played away, they stake their liberty and their persons on one final throw. The loser calmly enters voluntary slavery. However young he may be, however strong, he quietly allows himself to be bound and sold by the winner. Such is their persistence in a bad practice, they themselves call it honor. Slaves of this kind they trade away, partly to free themselves from the shame of such a victory. They do not use their other slaves as we use ours, by assigning them the various duties and offices of a household. Each slave has a dwelling of his own and a household to manage. His master treats him like a tenant and requires him to pay a quantity of grain, cattle, or cloth. This is the limit of the slave's service. All the other duties within a family are performed not by slaves, but by wives and children. To beat a slave, put him in chains, or condemn him to hard labor is rarely seen. They do sometimes kill slaves, not as an act of discipline or household rule, but in heat and anger, as they would kill an enemy, except that no revenge or penalty follows. Freedmen stand very little above slaves. They rarely have importance in the household, and never in the community, except only among nations ruled by absolute power. There they have more influence than the free-born, and even more than the nobles. In other countries, the low condition of freedmen is a sign of public liberty. They are strangers to the practice of lending at interest and increasing money by usury, and because they do not know the practice, they are better protected against it than they would be if it were forbidden by law. They move from one tract of land to another, taking possession of an area suited to the number of hands available for cultivation, and then dividing the whole among individuals according to each person's rank and condition. Because the plains are very wide, the allotments are easily made. Every year they change their fields and cultivate fresh soil, while still leaving land unused. They do not try to match their labor to the fertility and extent of their lands by planting orchards, enclosing meadows, or watering gardens. From the earth they demand only grain. For this reason they do not divide the year into as many seasons as we do. They understand winter, spring, and summer, and have proper names for each. Of the name and blessings of autumn they are equally ignorant. In conducting funerals, they show no splendor or vanity. Only one thing is carefully observed: with the bodies of distinguished men, certain kinds of wood are burned. They do not heap clothing or perfumes on the funeral pile. The dead man's weapons are always thrown into the fire, and sometimes his horse as well. The grave is raised only with sods of earth. They despise the display of long and elaborate monuments, considering such things burdensome to the dead. Tears and wailing they soon put aside. Grief and sorrow they keep for a long time. In women it is considered fitting to lament their loss, in men to remember it. This is what we have learned in general about the origin and customs of the whole people of Germany. I shall now set out the institutions and practices of the several peoples, so far as they differ from one another, and also give an account of what nations moved from there to settle in Gaul.
And there we will pause. Tacitus has shown us a people poor in gold and rich in freedom, chaste in marriage where Rome was decadent, brave in war and faithful to their chiefs, a mirror, held up to his own countrymen, and not a flattering one. Next time, in part 2, he turns from the customs of the Germans in general to the tribes themselves, one by one, a great roll call of names marching from the banks of the Rhine out to the very edge of the known world, ending among people so remote that Tacitus himself is not sure whether to call them men or monsters. Mind the footnotes, and beware the folly.